July 27th, 1944, 0603 hours. Near Saint-Lô, France. The fog hung low, clinging to the hedgerows like it was afraid of something. Through the gray mist, a German Oberstleutnant named Armin Eckler studied a map pinned to the hood of his Kubelwagen. His breath was calm. The bridgehead held. 2 divisions funneled through it nightly. Artillery covered both flanks. Nothing, not even the American Thunderbolts, could reach them here. Low-level attacks are suicidal, his adjutant had said the night before. Americans obey orders. They won't risk their planes. Eckler agreed. The Americans were effective, yes, but predictable, structured, rule-bound. Then, a sound pierced the morning stillness. It was not the drone of high-flying bombers. It was not the staccato rattle of distant tank fire. It was lower, meaner. The kind of engine note you feel in your chest before your ears catch up. Eckler looked up, just in time to see a flash of silver streak past the treetops. No contrails, no warning, just one plane, a single P-47, screaming down the road like it was hunting something. His men dove. A moment later, the earth convulsed. Smoke and dust swallowed the bridge behind him. Flames erupted from a fuel truck. Screams tore through the hedgerow mist. It was over in seconds. One pass, one pilot. Eckler stood frozen, his boots soaked from the ditch he'd flung himself into. What just happened? He'd commanded artillery units on the Eastern Front. He'd watched Soviet waves crumble under German fire discipline. He'd survived Kursk. But this wasn't war. This was chaos, personal, unauthorized. And yet, it had worked. The adjutant stumbled over, bleeding from the ear. It was just one plane. Eckler didn't answer. He looked down at the map again. The bridge marked in red pencil. Then up at the smoke. He didn't know the pilot's name. Didn't know why he came alone. But something was different now. A line had been crossed, and the war had just changed. 10 days earlier, the sky above Normandy was a patchwork of flak bursts and black smoke. The Americans had begun their breakout, Operation Cobra, a plan Eisenhower insisted would punch a hole through the German 7th Army. But the Wehrmacht had turned Saint-Lô into a fortress. Everything the Germans had left west of the Seine funneled through this city. Oberstleutnant Armin Eckler's orders were clear. Hold the corridor. Hold the war. They had one road, one bridge, and over 50 artillery pieces pointed at every conceivable approach. American bombers tried hitting it from 30,000 feet. But their bombs scattered across the bocage, killing cows and churning soil. The Germans watched and smirked. Saint-Lô was more than a town now. It was a hinge. If it held, reinforcements from the east could regroup. If it fell, the west was gone. The Luftwaffe grounded. Fuel was too precious. Pilots too few. The Americans ruled the sky, yes, but not the ground below 1,000 feet. "Let them fly," said General Paul Hauser to his staff. "They will not come lower." They believed American pilots followed doctrine, altitude, formation, orders. They hadn't seen what desperation looked like in a cockpit. Inside Eckler's command post, a hollowed-out butcher shop, the phones rang constantly. Ammo reports, convoy updates, SS units rerouting through the bridge nightly. He checked every truck manifest, every fuel estimate, every artillery shell accounted for. Precision. That's what the German war machine still had. Morale ran thin, but faith in the system held. And, at the center of it all, that bridge. Narrow, ancient, reinforced with iron plates, camouflaged by netting and shrub. A single point of failure, but a heavily defended one. Eckler watched as a column of tanks passed over it that afternoon, each one spaced carefully, just enough not to overload the structure. An engineer approached. "We've reinforced the pylons with steel mesh. It will hold." Eckler nodded. His monocle glinted in the fading sun. American doctrine, German structure. It was a chess match, and they still controlled the board. That night he wrote to his wife, "We are outnumbered, but we are not outclassed. They fear loss more than we do." He folded the letter, lit a cigarette. Somewhere beyond the tree line, an American pilot cleaned the dust off his cockpit glass. The morning of July 26th was unnaturally quiet. For 3 straight days, the skies had roared with the steady rhythm of B-17s and Thunderbolts. German soldiers had learned to measure time by their shadows, each air raid arriving like clockwork. But not today. Not a single engine. Not even the distant thump of bombs. Eckler stepped outside the butcher shop and scanned the sky. Low clouds drifted lazily over the rooftops. No contrails, no noise. His adjutant arrived moments later, adjusting his tunic with a nervous tug. "No air activity today. Perhaps they've shifted north?" Eckler didn't answer. He felt it in his gut. The same hollow twist he'd learned to trust in Russia. The silence wasn't peace. It was purpose. Down the road, a young Feldwebel named Otto Lenz sat on an overturned ammo crate, tightening the straps on his jackboots. He had a week's worth of mud caked behind his knees, and his hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. He heard it first, a faint whine, like a wasp at distance. Not overhead, behind the hedgerows. He stood squinting. Then, there it was. A flash of metal skimming just above the treetops, too fast to be real. No formation, no shadow before it, just one blur. The others laughed when he shouted, "You're seeing ghosts, Otto!" someone yelled. But he knew. He'd flown gliders back in '39. He knew the sound of a low engine pushed to the edge. He said nothing more, just stared toward the hedgerows. Later that day, the mail truck arrived. No letters for Otto. But Eckler received another memo. This one marked urgent. Unconfirmed sighting, lone American fighter operating below radar in St. Louis sector. Possibly reconnaissance. He raised an eyebrow. Low-flying recon was rare, suicidal even. Why risk a plane to look at what they already bombed from the sky? He dismissed it. A scout, maybe lost. Still, the silence stayed. Not peaceful, just wrong. By nightfall, 2 more units reported unusual engine noise near the bridge. No one connected the dots yet. Not until the fuel truck caught fire. But that was tomorrow. It came at 06:37 hours. No warning, no formation, just thunder, low and sharp, as if the sky itself cracked open. Oberstleutnant Eckler was mid-sentence, briefing a junior officer on convoy dispersal timings, when the blast shattered the butcher shop's front window. Glass sprayed the map table. They dove. Outside, the world had erupted. The bridge, their bridge, burned like a fuse. Black smoke coiled upward in thick, spiraling pillars. A half-track had flipped into the ditch. A fuel truck hissed, its metal frame swollen with heat, before bursting in a deafening roar. Men screamed. Radios died. Camouflage netting floated down like falling ash. Eckler crawled to the door, blood on his collar. Across the street, 3 soldiers were dragging a corporal whose legs no longer moved. He looked up, and for 1 second, caught sight of the P-47 banking hard, its silver belly gleaming through the haze. Low, below rooftop, beneath treetop. Impossible. He didn't drop bombs from the heavens. He flung them like a dare. The fighter vanished behind the hedgerows, leaving only silence in its wake, and the smell of burning rubber, diesel, and scorched uniforms. A lieutenant clutched his helmet, shouting above the chaos, "It was one of theirs! Came in under everything. No flak hit him. He was too low." Another whispered, "Who would fly like that?" The bridge had survived, technically, but 2 fuel trucks were gone. 5 supply vehicles burned, riddled with shrapnel. The approach was cratered and clogged with twisted metal. Worse, morale had cracked. Not because of the damage, but because they didn't understand what had just happened. There had been no sirens, no air raid, just one man, one machine, and no permission. In the command post, Eckler examined the blast radius, tracing it with a pencil on the map. He paused, hand trembling. The bomber hadn't missed. He hadn't guessed. He had aimed, chosen, executed, with no support. That night, the bridge was closed. Temporarily, they said, just for repairs. But in truth, no one wanted to be stationed near it. American planes had never flown that low before. And now, they had. Something in the air had changed. Eckler couldn't sleep. He lay on the butcher's cutting table, staring at the ceiling beams, and muttered to himself. No officer gave that order. In a canvas tent 20 miles west, Lieutenant Henry Spicer unbuckled his flight harness with fingers still twitching. The P-47 Thunderbolt behind him hissed, its engine cooling, metal groaning as it exhaled the last of its heat. Oil smeared across his cheek. His goggles hung loose around his neck, coated with dust and a single streak of blood. Not his. He stepped out of the cockpit, boots hitting the earth with a weight that felt new. Someone clapped him on the shoulder. A ground crewman with wide eyes and a crooked grin. "You weren't supposed to come back, sir." Spicer didn't answer. He walked to the edge of the tent, sat on an ammo crate, and pulled out his flight log. July 27th, 1944. Mission: unauthorized. Target: bridge near St. Lo. Altitude: tree line. Result: confirmed hits. Secondary explosions. He paused, then added a note in the margin. "Couldn't wait. Our boys are dying by the hedgerows. Someone had to try." He snapped the book shut. No orders had been given. In fact, orders had been clear. No low-level attacks without bomber escort. Too dangerous, too wasteful. Pilots were to stick to the plan. But Spicer had seen the map. He'd seen the stalled armor. The trucks backed up for miles because that bridge kept feeding German artillery every night. And he had seen the wounded. American boys with tourniquets made from belts, begging for morphine. So he flew, alone, beneath the radar net, under every flak gun and sound detector. He hadn't told anyone, didn't radio, just lined up the nose, adjusted for wind, and dropped both 500-pound bombs at 80 feet. He'd felt the shock wave kick the plane upward like a mule, and then he was gone. No glory, no film crew, just burnt fuel and a dented wingtip. Back at headquarters, the CO chewed a cigar and stared at Spicer's log in silence. "This is insubordination," he said, "and it might have saved 1,000 men." He looked up. "You do this again, and you better not miss." Spicer didn't blink. "Yes, sir." Later that night, he wrote a letter home to his brother, stationed with the infantry near Carentan. "If you saw what I saw today, maybe you'd understand why rules aren't enough anymore." Across enemy lines, Eckler sat in a cold chair, staring at photos of the bridge's remains. He whispered, "Who flies without orders? and still hits their mark. July 28th. Dusk settled over Saint-Lô like a lid over a simmering pot. And then it happened again. Another P-47, this time from the south. No formation, no warning. Just a blur of steel slicing through the smoke, its nose tilted with purpose. Bombs dropped, precise, direct. And before the first shout echoed through German lines, the pilot was gone. That night, flames danced across the ruined bridgehead. Ammunition trucks lit the sky like signal flares. Oberstleutnant Eckler arrived at the scene minutes after the blast. He crouched beside a twisted axle, still radiating heat, eyes locked on the crater's edge. The engineers had no answers. No one saw it coming. The flak guns hadn't even turned. One of the medics muttered. He flew under the tree line. Eckler stood slowly. This wasn't chaos anymore. It was rhythm. Pattern. The next morning at 0512, it happened again. A third plane. Different angle. Same altitude. Same fury. Eckler received the full damage report by noon. 8 vehicles lost. 3 supply depots scorched. A 4th bomb clipped the side of the command bunker. No casualties. But the message was clear. They weren't flukes. They were becoming doctrine. For 3 years, the Germans had studied American war methods. They knew their systems: air superiority from altitude, strict radio discipline, layered coordination. But this wasn't system. This was something else. Flexible, fast, decentralized. A different kind of war. At division headquarters, a heated discussion erupted. "They're not following orders," barked a major. "This is reckless." Eckler shook his head. "No, it's worse." He pointed to the map. "This is improvisation, strategic improvisation. They're adapting between meals." A colonel chimed in. "Even if they hit the bridge, what can one man do?" Eckler's voice dropped. "One man destroyed our fuel for 2 days. One man blocked 2 regiments. One man showed every pilot behind him how to do it again." Silence fell. The German war machine wasn't built to handle this. Not the tactics, not the mentality. They had trained for chess, but this was jazz. That evening, an American recon photo was intercepted. High resolution, taken hours after the 3rd strike. It showed not just the damage, but the exit route. Hedgerow gaps widened, tree branches clipped by wing edges. Flight paths were being mapped, shared, refined. By the time Eckler circled the crater that night, he wasn't looking for bombs. He was looking for fingerprints. He found none. Just boot prints in the dust. American standard issue, where a team had come to take measurements under cover of night. "They're already planning the next one," he whispered. It broke them, not with explosions, but with silence. By July 30th, the bridge near Saint-Lô was gone. Not destroyed, erased. The final strike came at dawn. 4 Thunderbolts. No warning, no orders intercepted. They flew in tandem, no higher than church steeples. One climbed after release. The others disappeared into the hedgerows. The Germans barely fired. Oberstleutnant Eckler watched from a ravine as the entire span folded inward like collapsing ribs. Dust swallowed everything. No one spoke for 5 minutes. When the smoke cleared, the supply route was a scar in the earth. That night, a captured American infantryman was brought to headquarters. A corporal, 19, dirt smeared into his eyebrows, 1 boot missing. Eckler interrogated him personally, asked who had planned the strikes. The boy smirked. "They didn't. Lieutenant Spicer saw the bridge and went for it." Eckler leaned forward. "He disobeyed?" The boy shrugged. "He didn't call it that. He just flew." A long silence. Then, "You don't understand," the the corporal added. They let him. Later, in a bunker lit by one dangling bulb, a German logistics officer dropped his pencil and said it aloud. They do what they want. It wasn't praise. It was fear. American pilots were acting on instinct, not awaiting radio calls or waiting for permission. One saw an opening, struck, and the others followed. Not blindly, but with evolution. In the days that followed, every German officer Eckler spoke to used the same word, uncontrolled. But they said it with dread, not derision. By August 2nd, every major bridge west of Vire had either been damaged or abandoned. The supply lines, once the veins of the German front, were now landmines waiting for wings. Inside the Saint-Lô Field Hospital, a wounded grenadier whispered to his nurse, "Our guns still fire, but the roads no longer connect." On the American side, Spicer's story spread. Pilots across squadrons began studying the hedgerow topography, drawing their own paths, swapping napkin sketches in mess halls. They weren't breaking orders anymore. They were redefining them. And the results? Unstoppable. A colonel at German Army Group B headquarters filed a desperate report. The Americans are fighting like partisans, but with factories. Eckler read the line twice, then folded the paper slowly as if afraid it might bite. What haunted him wasn't the American weapons. It was the idea that somewhere, right now, another pilot was deciding, all on his own, to end another bridge. And no one on Earth could stop him. August 3rd, 1944, 03:15 hours, somewhere between Avranches and Saint-Lô. Two American trucks rattled down a dirt track, headlights off, engines coughing quietly under tarps of dust. Each was packed with jerry cans, tools, and spare aircraft parts. They weren't lost. They were resupply for Spicer's squadron. Behind the wheel of the lead truck, a corporal from the Red Ball Express hummed Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy under his breath, swerving to avoid potholes deeper than a coffin. They had left hours ago, from a depot built in a week, powered by gas piped from the beach, staffed by cooks, mechanics, and 20-year-olds who changed tires like surgeons. By dawn, they reached a dirt airstrip hacked into a Normandy orchard. No tower, no radio, just planes and pilots waiting. Each P-47 lined up had a full load. 5 bombs, wing-mounted fuel tanks, 50 caliber guns, freshly fed. By 0700, 4 were airborne. By 0742, another bridge was gone. On the German side, the reports stacked like bad dreams. Supply interdicted near Tessy-sur-Vire. No movement possible west of Canessy. Unidentified aircraft attacked horse-drawn convoy. 4 wagons lost. It didn't make sense. No army, no doctrine was supposed to operate this way. Attacks from thin air, launched from nowhere, refueled in clearings, rearmed without waiting for orders. And yet, the Americans did. Eckler studied a captured fuel invoice, dated July 29th. The numbers burned more than the flames at the bridge. 4 sorties per plane per day. 800 gallons burned per pilot. Germany didn't have 800 gallons to spare for a company. America had it for a single man. Every morning, Spicer's unit flew, repaired overnight, fueled before sunrise. Ammunition swapped with the rhythm of factory lines. Eckler found another memo, this one translated from intercepted American signals. If it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't, change it. Fast. He stared at the line for a long time, and something cracked. Not in the bunkers, not in the bridges, but in him. The Wehrmacht had engineers, mathematicians, long-term plans written in ink on grid-lined paper. But the Americans? They had flexibility, permission to adapt, infrastructure that followed the wildest decision made in a cockpit at sunrise. Spicer wasn't alone. He was just the first. By now, every American pilot near the front had the fuel, bombs, and moral license to act, not recklessly, but freely. That was a system built to win. Eckler didn't sleep that night. Instead, he walked the ghost of the bridge, boots crunching over rubble and carbon, whispering to no one. They're not disobeying. They're expected to think. In a steel-beamed hangar 3,000 miles away, the whistle blew at 7 a.m. sharp. A factory floor in Willow Run, Michigan sprang to life, its heartbeat a thunderous rhythm of rivets and rolling aluminum. Here they built bombers, B-24s, one every 63 minutes. Each section rolled down the line, wings, tail, engines, pre-measured, interchangeable, color-coded. One team did the doors, another the hydraulics. The workers barely spoke. They didn't have to. The system did the talking. Henry Ford's dream had become a war machine, modularized, relentless. America's factories didn't wait for need. They anticipated it, flooded the future with supply before the front even asked. In Germany, things moved differently. Each aircraft was a masterwork, tailored, fitted by hand, painted by experts. The Luftwaffe built machines like cathedrals. America built them like toast. On the front, Spicer's P-47 had returned from its 9th sortie in 3 days, one wing dented, flaps loose. Within hours, replaced, swapped like a spark plug. No delay, no drama. A new bomb rack installed before the sun dipped behind the orchard trees. In the German rear, Eckler sat across from an ordnance officer, tapping his fingers against an inventory list. "How long to get another transmission for the Panzer IV?" he asked. The officer grimaced. 3 days, if the courier isn't strafed. 3 days for a gearbox. America swapped an entire wing before lunch. They weren't just faster. They were structured to accept loss, absorb it, learn from it, and return stronger. German command still treated tanks and planes like heirlooms. Americans treated them like pencils, disposable because they could afford to. And it wasn't just the machines. A field note intercepted from an American repair depot read, "Don't waste time fixing. If it's shot, replace it. If it's slow, dump it." Spicer's squadron followed this principle without flinching. No one mourned a damaged rudder. No one hesitated to abandon a stalling truck, because the line behind them, from Michigan to Normandy, never stopped moving. Eckler stared at a chart comparing German and American production. One number circled in red: United States 96 318 aircraft in 1944. Germany's total, 1/3 of that, and still dropping. The bridge wasn't the failure. The system was. Germany couldn't afford innovation. Every mistake cost weeks. Every pilot lost was a national tragedy. But America planned for chaos, planned for pilots like Spicer, gave them the tools, the fuel, and the freedom to make chaos count. By August 6th, the German front west of Saint-Lô was in retreat, not from numbers, not from tanks, but from absence. Absence of fuel, absence of roads, absence of options, and all of it began with a single P-47 diving below doctrine. Spicer never knew what he started. He only flew, every day, every run lower, tighter, faster. One morning, after his 11th sortie, he collapsed on the tarmac, boots still smoking, and muttered through cracked lips, "If I see that bridge again, I'm landing on it." His crew laughed, then loaded another fuel tank. At Supreme Headquarters, General Omar Bradley, received the latest figures. 2.1 million gallons of fuel consumed in 1 week. 13,000 tons of bombs dropped in 3 days. Over 90% bridge interdiction. Success west of the Seine. He nodded once. Keep pushing. The Germans couldn't understand it. Each bridge destroyed by one man, yet backed by an empire. Each risk taken not in defiance, but in confidence. Because the system would catch them, refill them, arm them again. Eckler read the captured numbers by candlelight. He blinked twice, ran his thumb down the margin, and read aloud. 2 million gallons to push one front line forward. He looked up, and we rationed bullets. The irony stung more than the figures. They had doctrine, beautifully engineered, precisely executed. But doctrine didn't rebuild bridges, didn't refuel overnight, didn't fly under trees. An American pilot could burn 800 gallons in a day just hunting bridges. Germany couldn't spare that for a battalion. What Spicer did wasn't a miracle. It was math. The bridge was gone because his tank was full. He disobeyed because someone filled that tank without question. Eckler penned his final report that night. It was short. They fly without orders. They strike without hesitation. They burn more fuel in a morning than we store in a week. Our doctrine is precise. Theirs is powerful. He folded the paper, lit a match, and watched it burn. Because in war, precision without power is poetry. And poetry doesn't stop a thunderbolt. Years passed. The war ended. Borders shifted. And names on maps changed, like faded ink on old parchment. But St. Lo remained. Not rebuilt, not truly. The scars stayed. A town of shattered stone and quiet ghosts. One autumn, long after the surrender, Armin Eckler returned. No uniform, no rank. Just a man with tired eyes and a cane carved from ash wood. He walked alone, step by step, down the broken path where the bridge once stood. There was no plaque, no marker, just dirt and weeds pushing through the cracks. He stopped at the edge of the riverbank, closed his eyes, and listened. Wind rustled through the hedgerows. Birds whistled from ruined rafters. And beneath it, if only for a moment, he swore he heard it again. That sound, that roar, low, close, unchained. He opened his eyes, half expecting to see silver wings slicing the tree line. But the sky was empty. He sat on a rock and traced a line in the dust with his cane, straight across, like a bridge. Then he whispered, as if to the air itself, "We trained for everything, except men like him." A boy passed behind him on a bicycle, humming a tune. American, probably. Eckler didn't turn. He just stared at the river. Not at what flowed through it, but at what had once flown over it. And the war returned to silence.